And for the viewers that do know you, obviously you're a returning guest. paintingthewhitehouse.com. Definitely check that out. And he's got a lot of good facts about the White House and weirdness that happened in it. Hal Marcovitz here on Fire Breathing Rob. Hal, let's speak about this. Now, you spoke about many presidents and their families have kept pets in the White House. Many of these pets were considered members of the first family, but some presidents were not known for treating their pets with love. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, you know, practically all presidents seem to have cats or dogs in the White House, but some of them don't make out
this
too
president
well.
doesn't have any
Right,
pets.
he doesn't have one. Lyndon Johnson, LBJ, owned two beagles, and he named them him and her. And he was photographed holding them up by their ears. Okay, and he caught hell from the animal rights movement because of that, because he liked to carry his dogs around by their ears. So that's a pretty funny story. Thomas Jefferson owned a sheepdog, but he had it killed because he thought it ate too much. Okay, and I don't know if there are any animal rights activists around then, but they probably would have had a hard time with that too. Theodore Roosevelt owned a bull terrier that he named Pete. And after Pete chewed the pants off of the French ambassador, Roosevelt had the dog banished to his home in Long Island. Another dog was named Heidi, and the Eisenhowers owned a dog named Heidi. But Heidi used to soil the White House carpets, so Heidi was kind of shoved out the door too.
So Hal, with all those funny stories though, why do you feel like all these presidents, they want a pet? You know, it's mostly dogs, I feel like, not many cats that I've heard about. But with that, why do you feel like, is it just because that's the American thing to have like two parents, two kids, have a dog? Or is that
I don't
why?
know, maybe there's some votes in the Electoral College that they can garner, you know, if everybody sees they have a pet dog and the dog, you know, gambles through the lawn. Yes.
Let's go into this. The White House is like any other house that needs utilities. Can you tell us about the first telephone in the White House and what happens when the gas line was installed also in the White House?
Well, the gas line went in 1848, and before the gas line was installed, the White House was illuminated by candles. All right, it was candlelight. So you know, technology, you know, found its way, and they had gas lights. And in 1848, a gas line was laid into the White House. But pretty soon, the White House started suffering from blackouts. The lights would go out every once in a while. So they looked into it, and they found out that some shop owners along Pennsylvania Avenue had illegally tapped into the gas line and were stealing gas from the White House, and therefore the lights in the White House were going out. So that was kind of the history of the gas line into the White House. The first telephone was installed during the administration of Rutherford B. Hayes. And the first phone number for the White House was #1. So President Hayes insisted on answering the phone himself. So if you owned a telephone back then, and you knew the phone number for the White House, and it wasn't that hard to figure out, you could get the president on the phone just by dialing 1.
Wow, that's real interesting. So let's talk about this now. I just learned this from you when I read the email when we were looking at the questions. And you are telling me that $50,000 is in a budget for the first ladies to redecorate the White House. To me, that's a waste of taxpayer money. But that's just my opinion on that. And how do you feel like I should ask you, how do first ladies use that money and how have they spent it? Any stories on that?
Yeah, Rosalind Carter didn't come anywhere near spending $50,000 on redecorating the White House, and she gave it back. She returned it to the Treasury.
That's great.
What she didn't spend. The Carters were replaced by the Reagans, and Nancy Reagan had a much different attitude. Nancy Reagan ended up spending $800,000 to redecorate the White House. All but $50,000 was donated by private contributors. Nevertheless, she spent $800,000 to redecorate the White House, including $240,000 just on the White House china.
Is the only, and you may know this answer, you may not, you talked about Rosalind Carter giving back that money, but has any other First Lady given back the money besides the Carters?
Not that I know of. I think that it may have happened over the years.
Well, Jimmy Carter was always the guy that was from humble beginnings, so I could see that. You know what I mean?
That's correct. I know our President Trump has spent his own money on some redecorations. I know he replaced the chandelier in the president's private dining room. He didn't like that, but he paid for it himself. And he also bought one of these like 60-inch flat screen TVs that he had hung on the wall in the private dining room. So I guess he could watch Fox News while he eats his Kentucky Fried Chicken. So
Kentucky Fried Chicken and McDonald's, baby.
Right.
So Hal, let's talk about this. I know you spoke about, and this is out of the questions that we talked about, but since you brought up President Trump, obviously he's the president right now. I know you spoke about the TV and also the chandelier. I know Melania, you said, sleeps in a different bedroom than President Trump. Any other interesting? Different floor. I'm sorry.
A different floor.
That's another big thing. Anything besides that have you learned so far while researching the Trumps about what they've done with the White House in general?
Basically, the only other kind of funny story that I came across about the Trumps and living in the White House was he didn't like it when he moved in, and he called the place a dump to his golf buddies. So,
I could see that.
I mean, that's, here's a guy who lived on the 80th floor of Trump Tower, and he thought the White House was a come down for him.
It's crazy. But anyway, we'll move back into the questions. What First Ladies have consulted with oh my God, I'm struggling with my pronunciation. Astrologers. Thank you. So let me repeat that question. Which First Lady have consulted with astrologers, Hal?
Well, we have Nancy Reagan on that list. She used to get her fortune told and convene with an astrologer. Mary Todd Lincoln, Florence Harding, and Julia Tyler, all First Ladies, and they all would meet regularly with soothsayers, the Ouija boards, the whole thing. Florence Harding would send the White House chauffeur out for her astrologer and have her brought into the White House like once a week for their weekly sessions. So that's how the Harding administration got things done. Through the stars.
So let's talk about this, rounding out the last two questions. During the administration of President John Adams, who did the laundry?
This is a very funny story.
Okay.
John Adams was the first president to live in the White House. And he moved in, I believe it was November 1st, 1800. And a few days later, he lost the election and he had to move out a couple of months later. But in that, I think it was like 4 months that, I think the inauguration was in April in that era. But in those 4 months that he was in the White House laundry was done by the First Lady, who was Abigail Adams. And she strung a clothesline inside the White House and hung the president's laundry on that clothesline because she did not want the public to see the president's underwear.
That's funny. So let's talk about this going on housekeeping chores, laundry, all that stuff. Can you talk about some of the quirky ways that first ladies have taken care of the housekeeping chores? I know you just talked about Abigail Adams.
Right.
Anybody else?
Eleanor Roosevelt had all the curtains in the White House trimmed 1 foot off the floor because she didn't like the way the housekeeping staff was getting the floors cleaned, and she thought the curtains were in the way. So she had all the curtains in the White House trimmed 1 foot off the floor, and they remained in the White House until the Kennedys moved in, and Jacqueline Kennedy looked at it and, you know, was appalled and had all the curtains replaced. Eleanor Roosevelt also planned President Roosevelt's meals, and he didn't like them. So he had his own kitchen installed on the second floor, and he had his meals separately prepared from what his wife was getting made for him. He thought they were too bland. Mamie Eisenhower planned all the White House meals, of course, but she would go through the newspaper and clip coupons out and then send the staff out to redeem the coupons when they did the grocery shopping, so she could save a few cents a week off the White House grocery bill. She was also one of these ladies who wore the white glove and would walk around the White House running her finger across the windowsills and the furniture, and if she found dust, she would summon the housekeeping staff back, and they had to clean those surfaces off. So yes, there was some quirkiness involved in just, you know, getting the floors vacuumed and the countertops cleaned.
So Hal, as we end the interview, can you speak about what got you into the book, and also for the viewers that did not see the interview before, where they can find the book and how they can learn more about you in general?
Well, thanks. You know, I wrote the book because the story kind of occurred to me that wouldn't it be funny if we send an ordinary house painter into the White House? Again, it's a novel, it's fiction. Wouldn't it be funny if we send an ordinary house painter into the White House, and he gets involved in all the intrigues and dramas and you know, all the goofy stuff that goes on in the White House? And that's what the book is about. An ordinary house painter finds himself surrounded by the political thunderstorm that goes on in the White House. And you can find the book at paintingthewhitehouse.com. You'll find some links there where you can buy the book online. And you also find some other funny stuff about the White House there, and a little bit about the book, and kind of some interesting facts.